This is Joe Tacopina, attorney for Meek Mill. You're tuned into Hot New Hip Hop. Well, he's doing as well as can be expected for someone sitting in an 8x9 box every day, unjustly and unfairly, improperly. But his spirits are good. He's a very positive human being. He lives with positivity, so he knows that this injustice will be rectified soon, and he's keeping as positive as can be. He has a lot of inspiration by many people who reach out to him, artists, athletes, normal people, children, and it inspires him and it keeps him going.
How has the support from the hip hop world been so far, and even like hip hop media?
I mean, it's been great. I mean, the hip hop world, the hip hop media, the people who understand who Meek is and what he's done, not only for himself as an artist, but for the community, has been amazing. Everyone's come up and rallied around him. I mean, even Drake has supported him. So when Drake's supporting Meek, things are good as far as the level of support he's been receiving. So, and that's important to him. I mean, the community's been embracing him. Today comes out the news that the district attorney's office in Philadelphia, not the current district attorney, not D.A. Krasner, but his predecessor, had compiled this list of cops who are corrupt. And corrupt simply means lying on the witness stand. That's perjury. That's a crime. Doing things that were illegal or improper in securing arrests. So they came up with this list of police officers who they wanted to keep away from the witness stand. Now, that's not how this is supposed to work. This isn't a game. It's not about hiding your weakness. When you're in the justice system and when you have the power of law enforcement and the power of a district attorney's office, you have to present all the evidence, good, bad, or indifferent. But you can't hide the ball and prevent defense lawyers from understanding that perhaps the officer who was the linchpin to your client's case, the key figure in your client's arrest, is somehow corrupt and unusable on a witness stand, so they bury that witness and they have another witness step in their place. That's not how it's supposed to work, especially without the disclosures being made to the defense. And this is not just about Meek's case. This is about hundreds and hundreds of other, young people in Philadelphia who may have been subject to cops lying on the witness stand, as is apparent and, I guess, uncontroverted at this point.
Yeah, I was reading that several years ago, federal prosecutors and the FBI alleged that Philadelphia Narcotics Office had been framing suspects stealing money and agreed to drop 800 cases and paid out at least $2 million to civil suits.
Yeah.
So it seems like this is a tie into a history. You're actually seeing it on paper, a history of what's been a problem in Philadelphia.
Correct. 800 cases. And a lot of the cases that were dropped because one officer, this Graham, was involved, and he's the arresting officer in Meek Mill's case. He's the only officer who testified against Meek, who lied on the witness stand about the facts of that night. That Meek has always maintained his innocence in regards to possessing drugs that night and pointing a gun at cops. He never did that. And then he was beat senseless, unconscious, to the point where he was hospitalized. And we're now finding out for the first time, a decade later, that this officer is on some, no-fly list, so to speak. He's incapable of being able to testify, and it's not the way this is supposed to work. But it is another factor in the situation that Meek finds himself in. But don't forget what we're talking about. The core here is that he was sentenced to 2 to 4 years in jail for violating probation after being on probation for 10 years. And 2 to 4 years in jail for violating probation on what is a technical violation, not a crime. And what speaks volumes about this is that both the prosecutor, the district attorney's office, who's been no friend to Meek Mill, and the probation officer, who's in charge of monitoring probationers and making sure that they comply with their probation requirements and the law, both suggested that there be no jail sentence handed down in this case because these were technical violations, and they both lauded Meek. They both talked about how spectacular Meek Mill was doing on probation, how compliant he had been, how he turned his life around. All the things we want people who have been in trouble to do, to come out, to rehabilitate himself, to re-enter society. Meek's done it all. These two law enforcement agencies, who normally are opposed to the defense, were agreeing with the defense, saying, of course, they shouldn't be in jail. And this Judge Brinkley excoriated them, treated them like they were defense lawyers, like they knew nothing about the case. And she, despite the recommendation of both the prosecutor and the probation officer, sent him to jail for 2 to 4 years. An complete, unfettered abuse of discretion by a judge who's shown a propensity to act outside the lines, to act inappropriately, to act unprofessionally, to act unethically. There's tons of proof of that. I mean, that's been well publicized at this point. The circumstances that surround this case are the most unique and most troubling I've ever been involved in. There are many things. For instance, Meek Mill was ordered by this judge to take etiquette classes. I mean, to say please and thank you and yes ma'am and no sir. I don't know any other defendant in the history of the criminal justice system that's ever been told that they have to take etiquette classes, not only take etiquette classes, but pay for etiquette classes. He paid $10,000 for 4 etiquette classes. The person who owns the company that received $10,000 to teach Meek to say please and thank you was a friend of Charlie Mack's. Of course, this all ties in to Charlie Mack, who is someone who is tied into this judge without question. The circumstances are plentiful. They could deny it, she could deny it all she wants, but the fact of the matter is, 18 times on the record, Meek was asked to go back to Charlie Mack and leave Roc Nation, the premier agency when it comes to this genre of music. Most of the time it was done by the probation officer, okay, Miss Underwood, who was a friend of Charlie Mack's. That's uncontroverted. But the funny part is, this probation officer was handpicked by this judge for Meek's probation. Probation officers aren't supposed to be selected by the court. This probation officer, Underwood, who has since been removed from the case, was picked by the judge. And every time these things happened, you had the district attorney saying, Judge, we're following your wishes. This is all on the record. We're following your desires. When you look at the transcripts and you understand the circumstance and the facts, it just keeps piling up. Charlie Mack brought in a lawyer to represent Meek at one point, a woman named Deborah Rainey. Meek paid her $10,000. She visited him once in jail, never showed up in court. And it turns out, without Meek knowing, Deborah Rainey was Judge Brinkley's lawyer. Things like that aren't supposed to happen, but they do. They continue to happen to this day. Judge Brinkley, while she's on sick leave, showing up at Meek Mill's community service that he was doing at a homeless shelter. You could ask any judge in America, forget Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, go to New York, go to Wisconsin, go to Idaho, ask any judge if they've ever shown up at a homeless shelter for someone who they sentenced to probation and watched them do community service at a homeless shelter. Obviously, there's something very personal here. So she was monitoring his probation at a homeless shelter. That's what probation officers are for, if they choose to do that, not judges. And then she interacted with him. And then there's instances where, she spoke to him off the record in her chambers, without counsel. And, she made a big deal months earlier on the record to say, I can never speak to you without your lawyer, Mr. Williams. Robert Williams is Meek's birth name. And then there's an instance where, at the end of a proceeding, she asked to speak to Meek in chambers alone with Nicki Minaj, Meek's then girlfriend. And they go back, and that's all on the record, and then they go back to the chambers, and, there's no court reporter to take down what's being said. There's no lawyers there. There's no anyone but the judge, Meek, and Nicki. And when they came out, when Meek and Nicki came out of that private in-chambers meeting, they both repeated a very troubling story, that the judge had made a request of Meek to remake a Boyz II Men song, Charlie Mack's band, by the way, Boyz II Men song, On Bending Knees, and to give a shout out to the judge in the song. And Meek thought, and Nicki as well, thought they were, being subject to a joke or that the judge was kidding. And when they laughed, the judge said, "I'm serious." And Meek refused that request. He said, "It's not what I do. That's not my genre." And she then said, "Shoot yourself." You can't make personal requests of a defendant who you're sitting in judgment of. But she did that. And then it goes to things like the transcript, for instance. There was a transcript that she put under seal in where Probation Officer Underwood, made a request in chambers again to have Meek rehire Charlie Mack. And that transcript was under seal. Meek spoke at length in that transcript. And the defense team couldn't get their hands on that transcript. But what the judge did was hire a criminal defense lawyer for herself. And she showed that sealed transcript to the criminal defense lawyer and let him opine as to whether she should release it, which is completely improper. It's a sealed transcript. If it's sealed, it's sealed. You can't go show it to some third party because it's your personal attorney. It's a sealed transcript. That's a serious violation. And we know that happened because the lawyer went out and bragged about how he was the one who told her to release the transcript after he read it. Completely improper, completely inappropriate, and yet things continue to keep, piling on like this. It's something that is troubling. It's something that clearly her conduct caught the attention of the FBI. I can't go into that entire colloquy that was had with the FBI, but it's a subject to one of our motions. That's one of the reasons that we don't believe she could sit in judgment any further of Meek, because based on her conduct regarding him, there was an FBI inquiry. And how could she now sit in judgment of a guy that may have caused her to be looked at by the FBI? So, things go on and on and on. Meek was filming a rap video. He and 7 other guys were popping wheelies at 1 a.m. on a barren street. There were no other people around. No people were crossing the street as they were popping wheelies. There were just them. And that's on video. And what's really funny is that on that same video, you see a cop van, police department, New York City Police Department van. Cops didn't put on their sirens and arrest all of them immediately for committing the horrific crime of popping a wheelie in Washington Heights. Of course not. That's not what they do. If the police were arresting everyone who popped a wheelie on a dirt bike in New York City, the jails would not have enough space, the judges would not have enough time, and the system would collapse. But what really, really shows you what that case was all about is that the next day, someone from One Police Plaza, the police headquarters, had spent time reviewing this video, and they made a command decision at police headquarters that they were going to arrest Meek Mill for popping a wheelie. They don't spend time at police headquarters going through every murder in New York City that's unsolved and making determinations, but they spent time deciding that they were going to arrest someone for reckless endangerment by popping a wheelie. But the funny part about that is when they came to arrest Meek as he was doing charity work at a kids' basketball event in Washington Heights, he walked out of there with 200 kids. He was signing autographs and doing selfies and spent 2 hours there. And he saw all these cops approaching him, and he thought he was being escorted out of the crowd. And he said, "No, it's okay. I'm going to sign until they're all done." And the police said, "Yeah, well, get in the car." And they arrested him in front of these kids, and it was really troubling. And the part about that's most disturbing is that the 7 other people on those bikes doing wheelies should have all been arrested according to, the logic that the police department figured that this was some sort of a crime for popping a wheelie. But the only one arrested was Meek Mill. And that tells you what that case was all about. And then they charged him with a felony that night so they could keep him in jail overnight, which, embarrassingly, the police commander at the precinct that was processing Meek said, "Listen, I'm sorry, but I have nothing to do with this. This comes from headquarters." And I said, "How can you charge him with a felony for reckless endangerment popping a wheelie?" And, immediately the district attorney did the right thing and dismissed the felony count at the arraignment. But what it did was cause Meek to spend the night in jail, which was punitive, and clearly the fact that he was the only one arrested tells you what that case was all about. It was about just going after Meek. When you look at what he's done with his life and what he's done and what he does for the community and the charity work that he does, that he doesn't talk about, that he doesn't brag about, it's disheartening. It's disheartening to see the criminal justice system try to break someone as positive as Meek, someone who's done as much for the community as Meek has done, and it's troubling. It's troubling, but this injustice will not stand. There's no doubt about that. The outcry is enormous, not only from Meek supporters, not only from his legal team, his management agency, not only from his friends or high profile people like Joel Embiid, Karl Anthony Towns, Kevin Hart. It's not just those people. I mean, those people are very prominent and very loud and very supportive. But it's people in the community. You see rallies and stuff. I mean, people don't even know Meek, but understand what a perversion of justice means. And when you have that level of support, it's pretty impressive. Perpetual probation is what this is. I mean, who's on probation for 10 years? This is the first time I've ever experienced it. But what she's doing is she keeps renewing and reinstating additional years of probation every time she cites a violation, however minor. I mean, but this guy is not on regular probation. I mean, probation, as I know it, I was a prosecutor. Probation is, you check in with your probation officer once a week, once every 2 weeks. You take a drug test once a month. You don't fail it. You don't get rearrested, and you live your life.
But he's not allowed to travel.
No, his probation's different. He's calling every day. He's appearing every week. Every time he wants to go see his kid, he has to make an appointment. Every time he has a concert that he has a commitment to, he has to make an appointment. There was one time where he went to Los Angeles for work, was approved, but the second show got canceled. He wanted to come home early to spend time with his child. He couldn't come back to Philadelphia until he got approval. I mean, he couldn't come home. That's not probation. That's Stalinism. That's different. That's something where clearly an example is being made of him. And you're set up to fail if that's your level of probation, where your every move is being monitored. I mean, there was a point in time where Judge Brinkley ordered him not to be able to record music on his probation, not to be able to record music. Let that swirl around your brain for a second. That's what he does for a living. That's being a productive member of society. That's what you're supposed to do when you're rehabilitating on probation. Another clear piece of evidence that she has lost all perspective here and she's not being fair and impartial to Meek, to call him a danger to the community. How? What has he done that could even be remotely considered a danger to the community? Not talking about his case 10 years ago. And then she called him a flight risk also. A flight risk. I mean, but Meek Mill a danger to the community, like he's going around breaking people's heads or doing something. I mean, his violation was that he was late, for a meeting once with a probation officer, or one of his shows was delayed, and he's having these technical violations. That's a danger to the community. And then she named him a flight risk. That's why she's not in bail. Flight risk, Meek Mill. I mean, where is he going to go? Where everyone's not going to say, "Oh, there's Meek Mill." I mean, it's so asinine that it doesn't even warrant comment. And obviously, artists in the hip hop community are targets, have a big bullseye on his back. All you need to do is look at the way he's been treated. Then you have clerks asking him to pay their kids' college tuition, handing him a note in front of Judge Brinkley. In her courtroom clerk handed him a note and then asked him, made her oral request that he help out with her kids' college tuition. It's like, I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone is really what this feels like.
It wouldn't happen to anybody else.
It wouldn't happen to anyone else. And then again, just look at this judge's track record of abuses. I mean, in her personal matters where she's a landlord, she has 29 lawsuits. 29 lawsuits. I don't know many people who have sued people 29 times. She's a judge. And we have letters, and the Philadelphia Inquirer's posted letters, in which she writes to her tenants who she's threatening to sue that she's a judge. And that if they go up against her, they should know that she's a judge and she won't, take this. Ask any ethics attorney whether that's permissible or not. It's not. It's an abuse of your position. It's improper. It's typical, but it's completely improper and unethical.